Welcome to Manufacturing Tech Australia with Shane Williams and Paul Mason.
Welcome to this special episode of Manufacturing Tech Australia. We haven't previously spoken much about ERPs, but essentially they're the digital backbone of any business. Incidentally, Shane has just released his new book called Cluster Puck, which essentially runs through the top 21 mistakes in ERP implementations. So I thought we'd mix things up a bit, flip the table on Shane, and ask him a bunch of questions on why ERP and other platform software implementations often get it so wrong. We hope you enjoy the show. Shane, here we are. We're flipping the table on you today. I'm going to be asking you questions. How are you today, mate?
Yeah, good. Although, as you say, it's normally you and I peppering somebody else with questions, right? It's a bit different when you've got the lens turned on yourself.
We've been talking about doing an episode on ERPs for some time. They're the digital backbone of any business, and especially in manufacturing businesses. We don't talk a lot about the carpet side of the operations, right? We talk a lot about the factory. We talk about robots and tech, but the fundamental digital backbone behind any business is the ERP system. So when you said you're doing a book on ERPs and the main mistakes in ERPs and implementations, I thought, perfect. Let's get you on the show. We'll put you on the other side of the table and I'll ask you a bunch of questions. And I guess give our listeners a real insight into whether they're implementing a new ERP or want to make some improvements to their existing one. I think all the information here is quite valuable.
Yeah, and probably just to that, while we're going to talk about ERP and the book focuses on it, there's almost nothing in there that is super specific to just ERP, right? Like the examples I'm using are ERP because that's the point. But software selection and implementation, whether it's anything in the organization, CRM or whatever that is, the challenges are the same.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Why don't you set the scene? Exactly, we're talking about software implementations and ERP specifically. How big is this problem and what are you finding? What does that problem look like and how big is it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. When I was writing this book, actually, I sent out some draft copies to some trusted folks around the industry and I got some varied feedback. And we're talking people who've been doing this for 20 plus years, right? And some of the feedback was, geez, you're painting our industry in a fairly bad light. It's not that bad. And others were like, I've seen this mistake 50 times. It happens over and over again. And the easiest way to describe this was if you go and stick why do ERP projects fail into Google, you get 1.8 million results, right? Now, I've written 21 critical mistakes. I could have easily written 50 plus. I'm not going to write 1.8 million. That might be a stretch. Just trying to keep it succinct down to 21 and distill down what are the common things that I see was really difficult. When I wrote my first book a few years ago, I actually found some research by a lady by the name of Dr. Cecily McDougall. And this is from 2016. And she'd said back then, 64% of tech implementation projects fail. And the cost was attuned to 5.6 billion Australian per year. But if you think about that, that's 2016 prices. Everything's gone up since then, right? You think about the cost of people and software alone, what does that number look like in 2024, 2025? It's got to be huge. And then you factor in not just software costs, but if this thing totally falls over, and there's plenty of examples where people abandon it altogether, then there's the cost of all those people that are distracted, either not delivering value in your business, as well as running around doing this project stuff. I think it was like last week or the week before, Department of Aged Care CRM project. There was an article that came out that said that the project budget had been increased from 116 million to 300 million bucks in just 18 months. I think Department of Defense project, their ERP project, is now 5 years behind schedule and 1.5 billion over budget. And they've had to delay it to 2030. So this thing was supposed to go live early next year.
These are just the ones we hear about, right?
100%. And Now there's going to be people listening who go, Shane, you're talking to medium-sized manufacturers. Why are you talking about defense projects? Like, we're never going to spend billions on stuff. When you're spending government money, you can hide it and then you've got big budgets to play with. And when it's abstract, when it's in your business, it's a lot more raw and real and probably devastating to the business, right? I know a transport company, Australian, and they spent 2 years trying to implement an ERP. And this is a couple of years ago now, dropped over $1 million on investment in time for the vendors, plus the software costs and whatnot, and then totally abandoned it. And you can imagine, I don't know, there's many businesses that exist in Australia that can just drop 2 years and $1 million and it doesn't impact their bottom line. If you're the business owner who's making decisions around this stuff, you're almost at a point now where our margins are so thin and we're getting pressed on all of our costs that making a mistake to put something in and it doesn't work or it doesn't deliver the value or it totally fails could be career limiting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that leads in perfectly to what I think, from my perspective, is a big mistake, and that's the scoping part of things. And that was always the biggest problem. And I think that's one of the major causes of why these projects are going over budget, because people aren't really upfront declaring what they need, exactly how it's going to interact with their other systems, or the integration side with suppliers along the supply chain. Like, they just don't think about the big picture and scope it out properly to start with.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, scoping. If the project goes well, everyone thinks that they did a great scoping job. And if it goes to custard, it's the scope's fault. The trouble with scoping is that you can get really clear on what it is that you think you need. The how and the elements of getting there, often ambiguous, and the most about all the problems you're going to encounter at the end of the project, not at the beginning. So just trying to unpick these. This is how we think the business works, and this is what we want to get to. And then kicking someone for getting the scope wrong at the end is, I get it, but also I empathize. You know the least at the beginning of the project, and that's the time you're expected to come up with the plan. But what I would say is I think the opportunity in terms of scoping is if you can understand what you really need, you've got the best chance of success. I think oftentimes we fall into the problem that's right under my nose is the thing that I'm solving for. And so I go to market looking for a product that solves that problem. And that works when you're a small growing business in that startup phase, right? When you're big enough that you need an ERP, if you follow the same approach of what's the problem that's right in front of me and I'm going to need to solve for that, I think you come unstuck. Because if you imagine I've got all these problems in my business, and the typical one, the way that I hear about it is my reports, I don't trust them. I don't trust the data that I'm getting. And you scratch the surface of that and you go, why not? Oh, because when the finance data comes across, Jody sends it, and then Fred tries to match it with the ops data, and then the numbers don't match, so they massage it. And by the time it gets to me, we're running the business by it because it's the best I've got of a bad situation, but the data's not necessarily great. And you know what's underlying that? It's the disparate systems, it's the spreadsheets, it's all the stuff that's getting in the way. And if you start talking to people, they're like, oh, it's frustrating, it takes time, it's bubbling up there. But if you go, I'm just going to solve those problems right now, imagine, and this happens too often, imagine you fixed them. And the thing comes in and you get the right partner and the right software, and they come in and they solve all those problems for you. And you go, you beauty, I can now get more product through the business. I can see my numbers. The sales team's far more efficient. I'm now getting to the point where we're outselling our ability to deliver. And you go, great, now what? Oh, now we need better inventory management, or we need the next thing. And that's when you go, oh, but hang on, the system we put in doesn't do that. Now what? Now you're back at the square one again. What product do we need for that? And so you're just repeating the sins. And I reckon to flip that, it's almost, if you're doing I call this knowing your real needs. And I take businesses through this process at the early part of an engagement where we really sit down and do their tech strategy, is don't just talk about the things that are happening and annoying you today. Like, we do need to understand those deeply. But if those disappeared, what happens in your business next? What's the next big thing that you're going to need? What are your competitors offering in the market? Not just product, but in terms of the way they do business that you don't do. That sort of bigger picture, things that the business is going to need when it grows, because you're stagnating now because the tech's getting in the way. What are those things? What do they look like? How are you going to ensure that the system you put in, even though you don't necessarily need those capabilities today, how do you leave the cables hanging out the back so that when the time comes that you need those capabilities, you can actually plug them in? Or do you end up in a scenario where you've just solved the problem in front of you and you're just repeating the process of, now we've got to go find another thing. Now we've got to connect them together. Now we've got another headache.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because businesses, when they go through their let's make a great product, they go ask their customers what do they want to get a great product market fit, right? But often in a business, in internal business operations, they don't get all the key stakeholders. They don't get the purchasing and sales and maybe the engineers involved, the guys on the manufacturing floor. They get that cross-functional team together to get perspectives of what everyone needs and buy-in from everyone. The people part of things and the teams is so important.
Yeah, if there's a core group, let's call it of senior, middle management or whatever, who are making assumptions about how the business works. Because I've worked here 20 years, right? I don't know how the place works. And yeah, you did. But the context that you had of how, I don't know, operations work down on the floor might be a little bit removed. But if you get the people who are on the floor, they can tell you how things are happening today, right? Shit's changed. The way that the products are coming in from our suppliers is slightly different, or we've changed the business process in time. And understanding what the business need looks like is 100% a process of getting everybody in the room so you can get those broad perspectives across the business. Because what you tend to say is, hey, we've got this challenge with, I don't know, make it up, accounts receivable, right? And so we're going to solve that. And we're going to take a finance approach to that. And you go, yeah, that's all well and good, but there's process up and downstream that is the receipt of the goods and the putting it into inventory and minimum max levels and all that stuff that feeds into that process, or sales, or whatever these other elements, the tentacles that go right across the organization. And folks who you think are 3 levels removed and will have no perspective on this, when you start unpacking that and talking about it, they'll go, yeah, but hang on, that impacts us over here. Something else happens and vice versa. So you're right. Understanding what your needs are is a process that needs to deeply understand and get perspectives right across the organization.
Yeah, for sure. I want to just jump back a little bit higher level here. So what I really liked about this book, it's not 300 pages of fluff. It's 100 pages of down and dirty, no BS. Here's the problems, here's the solutions. But what I like is just unpacked it into sort of 6 key parts: the preparation, the vendor selection, the products, the implementation, the team, which is a quarter of the 21 mistakes is just around team and getting that buy-in, and then the final pulling it all together. But I think one of the key parts for me is really the vendor side. When you're selecting that right partner to help you through that implementation is one of the critical parts. And I feel like, for me at least, building trust with that vendor so that you can trust they're not just trying to upsell you stuff. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, and every partner will tell you the same thing, right? It's hard to build because particularly in the early stages of that engagement, what have you got to go on other than a perception? You've got no runs on the board to prove that out. Your best bet is that you get a referral from somebody else, and then you walk in the door and they go, "Hey, you can trust this guy. He worked for this organization, did a great job for us." But trust is a massive factor. And if you think about the majority of folks who probably be listening to this, we're talking about, in many cases, multi-generational businesses, but also just medium-sized businesses that work a lot on relationship. So I think there's a couple of things to consider there, right? In terms of how do you get the confidence in the partner before you had a chance to build a relationship with them? And there's probably two different chapters in the book of this. At a high level, the first one would be, don't underestimate the value of customer references. Customer references are super important. The challenge I always get put back to me on this one is, but the vendor's not going to give you a name of a reference that's going to say bad things. And you're right, 100% they're not going to. But in my experience, and having done this a few times, if you go and talk to a customer reference and you ask specific questions, pointed ones, people won't lie to you. There's nothing in it for them to sugarcoat what's going on, right? Every implementation has its challenges. Every relationship has its challenges. And every piece of software has its positives and negatives, right? Stuff that works, stuff that doesn't. If you ask the right questions, people will tell you warts and all. They don't sugarcoat it because there's nothing in it for them to hide what that looks like. And so even though they're a positive reference, they're going to say positive stuff. They're also going to tell you what's really going on. And I think it's a bit analogous to motorbikes. I ride motorbikes, as do you. And if someone asks me, would you recommend your bike? The answer is yes. I've owned the thing for 20 years. But am I happy with everything with it? No. You've seen mine. It's customized like you wouldn't believe, right? Bigger handlebars, and I've moved the foot pegs and whatnot. Why? Because I've adapted it to me. So if someone says, would you recommend it? Yes. What do you and don't you like about it? Oh, it was a bit higher, lowered it, did this, that, and the other. And it's going to be the same with a piece of software or a partner, right? How does the software work for you? It does this, it doesn't do that. How does the partner work for you? Oh, you know what? They did the implementation really well. The backup support wasn't the greatest. So we had to have a difficult conversation. So even though they're saying, yes, these guys, they're good and I worked with them, they're still going to tell you the truth.
I think setting that expectation too, because you're absolutely right in that aspect, because you're not going to get a partner that's 10 out of 10 on every score. You're not going to get a software solution or an ERP that's going to fit your business perfectly. So you got to set that expectation.
And then I think the other thing about partner selection, the guys that come in, their job is to get you across the line on buying a piece of software. Now, I'm not saying everybody's like this. There's some charlatans out there who'll do a dog and pony show and try and get you across the line on something that's not a good fit. Most of them are trying to do the right thing. So I'll preface it with that. But the reality is they're there to get you to get across the line on picking up their application and showing the benefits of theirs over another, which means there's a group of people called pre-sales team whose whole job is to look at your business need and the challenges you're talking about and show their product in the best possible light. That's their job. So when you get the demonstration at the end, you go, wow, it does all these things. That's all well and good, except once you sign the document, you very quickly hand over to an entirely different team in the organization, right? The partner's delivery team, who's then responsible for getting this thing into your business and then probably either supporting it beyond there or handing over to another team to do support. The sales team, pre-sales guys who showed it to you, for the most part, other than taking you out for lunch, you'll never see you again, right? It's good that they can show you the product. But the team you want to really understand, do they have the capability? Are they a good cultural fit? Can I work with them? Is the guys who are going to be doing the work. Now, are they onshore? Are they offshore? Can you work with them? Are they in your time zone? Do they demonstrate experience in your industry? All these questions you're only going to answer if you can get in front of the people who are going to be doing the work, not the people who are trying to flog it to you. So I think the challenge there is exactly that, right? When you're talking about building relationships and trust, if you can't get your sense during the early stages of your selection about who the other people you're going to work with, you very quickly could end up with buying the sales team and not the delivery team and ending up sorely disappointed.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess assuming that we get through that stage and we've got a great partner and we're happy with it, we've got a bit of trust building there. Now we're trying to select this product. And I guess in many cases, you've probably done all this way before you've selected your vendor because you've probably got a decision matrix or something to pull together all those things that you're looking for in a solution. Therefore, you've already found the partner to deliver that solution.
Not necessarily, right? So in some instances, you'll find that you'll actually end up selecting the product through the way the partners represent it. So you'll say, you know what, I'm weighing up ERP brand A versus B. They need to prove both the software and the implementation in order to get you to buy. So part of that process, you're evaluating both in many respects. You're right. You have to make sure that the amount of capabilities and features that you need now and in the future exist in the product they're putting in front of you. And that's part of the courting process, if you like. But I think you probably end up pretty towards the end going, I got a feel for both the product and the partner. Now, there is instances where you go, you know what, I feel like this is the right product, but they're not the good fit in terms of I didn't like when I met the delivery team, it wasn't for me. You just talk to the software vendor and go find me another partner and then keep moving, right? It's not a big deal. Similarly, you might go, hey, this partner seems to really gel with us, but the product's not, it's not for us. It's whatever. And it has happened where you go, you know what, it's just too many capability gaps, but I think these guys are the right fit. A lot of the bigger implementation partners represent multiple products anyway. And better that you find that out during that early phase or an early phase during a pilot or a prototype than later.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that kind of leads nicely into this implementation piece, because that's probably one of the big questions people are like, I can't possibly go down updating my ERP or changing because I'm so entrenched in the one I've got right now, or I can't change from zero or whatever it happens to be. What are our options there? Can we run a couple side by side, or what do you find most successful in terms of rolling out that new solution?
You touched on something there that I think really interesting is that how do you make it successful? And I was alluding to it a second ago. And some of the implementation partners are not going to like this, right? But I genuinely believe that the best way for you to make the decision you've got both the right partner and the right product is to do a paid prototype. And that would include, therefore, a paid detailed scope. When we started off, we were talking about scope. Now we're talking about implementation. Some of the partners, and it's in their best interest, and in terms of your interest, I would argue in terms of time and money, it's faster to just start and just go through. But I think there's a missed opportunity, or I'm a pretty strong advocate for it, that you have a milestone in there where you've got the absolute minimum number of software licenses that you've committed to do that enables you just to stand up a prototype. And the prototype is there for that partner and that software vendor to prove out some of those unique edge cases that are really specific to your business, the ones that are going to cause you the most pain in terms of change of process that you just talked about. And you go, I don't need you to build an entire system to show me it working with my data. But what I really need to see is processes A and P and Z. And I need you to go deep on those with my data and show me how this system is going to solve that problem. And it's going to be better than what I've got today, because that then gives the ability for the delivery team to come in, who's the real people who are going to do the job, spend some time with you really deeply understanding the scope and doing all the scoping documentation, and then building out the prototype that goes deep on those things that are really specific and unique to your business and prove the software works. Then we're a good fit. And so you've limited your risk, but you've also given yourself a really solid foundation for now we understand the scope deeply. The scope's been defined, co-delivered between people who really understand the software and have broad industry experience, and our internal people who deeply understand our business collaborated to build that together. You've got a pretty good, strong foundation for success.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And I think I haven't seen that happen very often, but it totally follows the whole MVP process of developing a product or other hardware software projects, right? But internal operational stuff within the business, for some reason, we always seem to treat those a little bit differently than the projects and the products that we're building.
It's the same thing, right? Understand what the market is telling you that they need, then go and put something out there and try it. Different words for understand your scope and build a prototype.
Yeah, for sure. Shane, I want to talk about people. We touched on it a little bit earlier. And I think getting the team, the resources, the plan, all that kind of stuff together, get the leadership team on board, get the right stakeholders in the room, get buy-in from everyone, make sure you got enough resources, all these kind of things that sound so obvious. And I know you've got a bunch of different sections of the book. I think it's about a quarter of actually the book is around the people side of things and getting the team on board. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, right? Like software is part of the problem. If you talk to anybody who's been on this journey, and I think even people who haven't been on this journey can pick this one pretty easily, right? It's if your team's not on board or you haven't effectively figured out how to get people engaged and you're not leading from the front, then you're setting yourself up for a failure, right? And I've got a few chapters on this. And honestly, I only scratched the surface. There is entire books on change management and project management, all this sort of stuff, right? And the point of this book is not to replace those. There are deep disciplines that exist explicitly there. But this was just to say, hey, these are the types of things you need to be thinking about, and this is the implications if you don't. And so I talk about stakeholder engagement in the book, and that's right from the beginning when we're talking about understanding the needs and bringing the right people in the room through to, hey, now we're going live, right? And have we got the right people in the right training? Is the training designed around the way they learn? Because some people need to be shown, some people need to be told, some people need to see it. One size doesn't fit all. And all the elements in between. There's a couple of chapters in there where there's examples like there's a business in Melbourne and they create prepackaged meals for homeless folks. And so their whole purpose is around feeding people and making sure that they get good nutrition, even if they can't afford it. The CEO realized that he built this thing out of his kitchen in a restaurant that wasn't doing so well during COVID. And now it's massive. And so what am I going to do? I need to put in some systems. Went to put in an ERP and the thing just never got legs, even though it was probably the right solution for the job. And when you unpack what went pear-shaped, it was the people who are in the kitchen or in the packing facility and this thing's getting pretty large now. Honestly, if you talk to them, they're in tears going, he's going to try and get rid of us. I love this job. I love working at this company and they're going to get rid of us and we're going to get replaced by this software. And the opposite is actually the reality. And it's so unfortunate that it went pear-shaped because when you talk to the founder, he's like, my goal for this is to find out how to make this practice or this business more efficient because I want to feed more people. And I know I can do it. But right now, we're at capacity and I'm sure we have the right amount of people and we have enough people donating food and we've got enough transport companies willing to distribute. I know we can do more. And I'm convinced that it's process and software that's getting in our way because we're literally doing everything on bits of paper and spreadsheets because that's all we needed to do when we were a tiny kitchen. And so the unfortunate part there is there was no intention to get rid of people. The intention was to go, hey, I want to make you so much more efficient so we can do more good. And the reason people joined this organization is they believed in the vision. So unfortunately, that lack of engagement with stakeholders meant that the leadership hadn't clearly communicated to the folks on the floor the why and what it meant for them and the impact of their job. And so they assumed incorrectly, but how were they to know that this was all about cost cutting and getting rid of people? And it's unfortunate that the whole project fell over. They had to abandon it and they're going to have to start again for that reason. And part of that is making sure you've got the right people engaged from the beginning right through to the end of the project. The other element that I think is super critical is I call it the leader's not all in. What I mean by that is these things, they need to be led by a strong, visible leader who can demonstrate the value that this change is going to bring, can set the vision and can reinterpret it. And there's a case study in there, I won't go into detail now, but the difference between the two CEOs in the same business, the first one who ended up having to leave the business because the project failed, the second one who took over, and their approach to engaging the teams and leading from the front, and the contrast that just that leadership style created for the success of not just the project, but the business. The second CEO who came in would literally turn up to Smoko and just sit down and yak to people about, hey, what's going on in your world? And would drip feed, hey, you know what? This is where the project's up to. And I'm really glad you gave me that bit of feedback. I'm going to tell the project team because I think that's important. So setting the stage for, I will listen to everybody and I'll take their feedback and I'll make sure the project addresses it, but also reinforcing this is where we're taking the business. This is why this is a good thing. I know it's going to be hard, but we want to take it forward. And then eating their own dog food in terms of, I'm going to run my business using this tool when it's in. So I'm not going to just sit back in my office, sign off on the project and hope everyone else manages it. I'm going to get in there, get on the tools, do the training with the team. And when it goes live, I'm going to start doing my reporting out of the system and we're going to talk to the numbers and the stats. And we're going to use the tool and I'm going to drive the business using it. Therefore, everybody has to get on board because there's nowhere to hide. If the leadership goes, this is an everybody else problem, I just signed the checks, you're setting yourself up for a fail.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about that final grind. Okay, you've been through the whole process, you've been through implementation, or maybe you're partway through implementation. What does it all, when it's wrapped up in a nice pretty bow at the end, what does that look like? And I guess what are some of the things to keep your eye out for in terms of that final part of implementation?
Yeah, that final grind's an interesting one, right? It's the part that nobody wants to do that just sucks. But it's where the heavy lifting gets done to get you the value. You think about the final grind, that's who's going to go and get all the data out of all the spreadsheets and all the existing systems and whatnot and make sure that it's not garbage, because often it is, and clean it all up and load it into the system. Earlier you talked about, do you run things in parallel and all that sort of stuff? Making those decisions. Are we going to run two systems in parallel for 1 month end or an entire quarter, or what does that look like? Because you're effectively signing yourself up for, okay, that means everyone's double handling everything in every system for that period of time. Do you have that much capacity in your business? If the problem is, I'm putting in these systems to increase capacity because we're already overwhelmed, how are you going to double down and for how long? And so it's working through some of those things. Training's a big one we massively underestimate. And I talked earlier about change management being broader than training and being stakeholder engagement, but just the training itself. Now, I think there's an opportunity here where you do the training and you immediately go into testing, because this then the next piece in the grind is making sure that things work. We never dedicate enough time to it. People who do the testing give it a superficial pass because tick, yeah, look, it follows the script and it works. But I'm busy doing my day job because I'm not dedicated to the project. And I'm paying a superficial view to the training because it's videos and I don't engage with videos. I need someone to show me. So there's all these elements of that last mile where things trip up and the training's not done properly, the testing doesn't happen, the data's not clean. And those are the things that end up absolutely crippling the project.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the tips you can give to manufacturers out there that are looking to either put in a new ERP, they're running Xero and spreadsheets at the moment, putting in a new ERP, or maybe they're implementing a CRM, or maybe they want to upgrade their ERP? What are some sort of practical tips you can give them aside from the 21 mistakes and what not to do?
Once you've really understood what it is that you need, and what I mean by that is make sure you get people right across the organization involved. When you really understand what that looks like, then talk to people. Everyone I bump into goes, oh yeah, no, I know of a story of one that screwed up. So you talk to them, and not necessarily to try and talk yourself out of it, but to talk to them to go, what are the lessons? Asking those questions about what would you have done differently next time, and use those as your guide rail around what is it that I need to be focused on and how to make the right decision. Also ask them, who's your trusted vendor? Don't assume that the software that they are using is right for you necessarily, because every business is different. We all say it, and yet we go, Jim's got, I don't know, XYZ product, so therefore it's going to work for me. But are they the right partner? Don't just jump in and buy the first product that comes across your desk, and then really go to that stage of paying for a pilot and prototype before you lock yourself into anything, because it's going to give you the best chance of making the right decision.
Yeah, and I guess in reality, there's so many different options, right? You can go a really industry-specific solution that may have already 80% of the features that you want. You can have one that's more generalized that'll allow you better integration with your existing platforms. There's so many different options. It's such a minefield, and I think often people get bogged down in that decision-making that slows the whole thing down, and sometimes that's why they abort it, because it's just too hard.
Yeah, and I think often where we go is we say, I know I need an ERP. So we start the search, and it's a Google search like everyone else does, right? You start searching around the internet, and we end up getting distracted with, this product has all these capabilities, right? If you haven't done the work to understand what it is that you need now and in the future, you're going to get distracted by all the things that these softwares say that they can do. But they only work if you've got a really solid foundation in terms of the processes are solid, the data's solid. You're not going to get the shiny things on day one. It's just not the way things work. And you end up buying the thing based on the capabilities that it says it can deliver, only to find out you can never leverage them because you haven't got the foundation. And the reason you haven't got that is because you didn't do the work up front to make sure you found the right product that met your needs. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that you're going to end up paying a lot of money for capabilities you can never make use of because you started off with the wrong product in the first place. I'm not saying don't go Googling around the place, but what problem are you trying to solve? And if you haven't done the needs piece and you don't understand that, then you're probably going to pick the wrong product.
Yeah, makes sense. So are there any other final thoughts that you want to leave the listeners with, Shane, around ERP implementation or projects in general?
Yeah, I think the last point I'd make is that this process is not easy. And it's probably one of the reasons why it falls over, right? The reason you often get into this is you're constraining your business and you're trying to find some efficiencies and things are tough. So you go and make a decision that you're going to do something and you start bringing people into a room to run a workshop. That takes people off the floor of their day who are already overwhelmed and got too much work on. Then you make a decision you're going to do something and then the pain really starts, right? So unless you just doubled your workforce overnight, you're going to start pulling people out of stuff. So there's a period of time there where business actually gets harder before it gets easier. And I think that a lot of the tendency is then to go, we'll just make this person available one day a week and not give them enough effort and whatnot. There is a tipping point, and it's not necessarily even on day one of go live of the new system because everyone's still trying to find their feet and use two systems and figure it out. But a point not far beyond that flip. And so the promise of doing this is that, yes, you're going to put in a whole bunch of effort now for less productivity. When those change and go the opposite direction, then the promise, of course, is the ERP implementation is going to mean that for less effort, we're going to get more productivity, and therefore we can use that time to generate more revenue or do whatever it is we're going to do. But don't assume that you can just sign a contract and this magical team of wizards come in and put software into your business and you just get on with your day job and everybody's 10 times more efficient. There is a hard slog ahead. You're on the bad side of a bunch of hard work. And yes, the benefit is going to be there, but if you haven't thought through what does that look like in terms of effort and time and people and factored that into your planning, then no amount of smart people that can come in and give you advice or great software vendors who do good work is going to solve the problem that you're already at capacity and you need to find more of it if you're going to get the outcome.
That makes a lot of sense, Shane. And I think, there is no silver bullet, right? It's once you get out that other side and the work's done, that's when you can start to see some of the benefits.
Yeah. And I think that's why resources like the book and my website and independent consultants who can guide you through that process is going to give you the best chance of success. Because the last thing you need when you've got all this extra work on top of your shoulders is to make bad decisions, not through being an inept leader, but just because you don't have the right information at your fingertips. Thanks for hanging around and listening to today's episode. I hope you got some value from it. If you want to grab a copy of the book, please visit my website, shanewilliams.com.au/clusterpuck. You can get a copy of the digital or print version, and you can also sign up for the members only area where I'm going to add all the additional resources over time. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Tech Australia with Shane and Paul, recorded on the traditional lands of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people. For more information, jump on the manufacturingtech.au website. Remember to hit the follow button to join us again next time as we continue to explore the intersection of manufacturing and technology.